Okay, so I'm here today with Dr. Ashley Hokut. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello. And we connected via a network online that we're both a part of. And I brought her here, asked her to come here as a guest to dive into pelvic health. And this is something that I have been on my own journey with since becoming pregnant and in my postpartum period. And I wanted to speak with her, not about tips and tricks, but really about um, the deeper reasons why we need to be more informed about our bodies, more concerned with our health overall, as pregnant and postpartum women, and um, what she wishes that all women would know and understand going into this time. So, Ashley, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So, if we could just start out with a little bit about yourself and how you got into your work.
Sure. So, I didn't really get into the pelvic health part of physical therapy until after I had my own two children. I started out in orthopedics. I did that for many years. And then I had two beautiful baby girls. So, two vaginal deliveries, both were unmedicated. And the first one was, I guess, when I look back at it, kind of traumatic, being that I did have a perineal tear and my recovery was like pretty challenging to say the least. Um, and even though I had been practicing physical therapy for a decade and was very well versed in tissue healing and getting people back to function, I struggled postpartum getting myself back to function because like so I was so focused on the baby. I didn't even like nourish myself with food, with which my tissues needed, but like anyways, I don't want to dive too much into my story, but like that whole part of my postpartum journey really opened my eyes to, well, if I don't know so much about my body, which I thought I knew, you know, being a physical therapist, like there's so many other moms out there that probably also have no idea. And so I took one continuing education course for pelvic floor and I was completely hooked. I was like blown out of the water. And I think part of it was because when I took that one course years ago, I realized that I had a lot of pelvic floor issues when I was a child. I had constipation when I was um, like when I was ready to have sex, it wasn't comfortable. Like when like all these different things that I just thought were that's how it is, like I had no idea that there were so many different things I could have received help for along the way. And I was like, wow, I'm like the candidate to heal myself to then bring those lessons to others. So that's kind of what brought me to become a pelvic floor physical therapist, and specifically with the passion of working with pregnant and postpartum moms.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey. And I feel that when just something of your own experience leads you to dive deeper and ask questions, understand why. I mean, that's why we're here, right? And even
Mm-hmm.
as listeners, that's why we're here, knowing that this journey into motherhood is has the opportunity to be so transformational, especially with how we understand and relate to our own bodies, right? Suddenly
Yeah.
this self, this suit that we've been inhabiting for
Yeah.
decades now seems so foreign in so many ways. And we have the opportunity to learn about ourselves more deeply. Um, what would you say um, is common in your practice? Like, why do women come to your practice? And then what are some ahas that they have while they are working with you.
Okay. So if we kind of stay a little bit in the prenatal postpartum, um, many pregnant moms come to me for like pains, like hip pain, back pain, groin pains, like that kind of thing, like trouble walking upstairs, trouble getting in and out of car, rolling in bed, things like that. Or they're coming for, they might be leaking urine, right? So they're looking for help to not be leaking when they sneeze or cough or work out or exercise. And then some are coming for birth prep, like to really help prepare their body for birth. Because some of them might have had pain with sex and they're like, oh, if that is hurting, what about a vaginal delivery? Or they go to their GYN or midwife and the this would be not during pregnancy, but maybe prior, like maybe it was painful to when they use a speculum, or even during pregnancy if they did any internal and the doctor or the midwife noticed there's some tension, then they would come in to help work on that, like let go and release and kind of surrender, because during birth that's really an important part of that. Some patients are coming for constipation issues, prolapse. That would be a bigger one postpartum, but some of them also during pregnancy, because I've had a patient come to me who she was pregnant with her second, and she was worried about her prolapse and would it get worse as she birthed her second. So we worked on like, well, what does the prolapse look like in various positions? And when you're applying a little bit of extra intra-abdominal pressure, or like imagine like you're straining to poop, like that kind of a force, like does the prolapse, and I can explain what prolapse is, but does that look like it's worse or better or okay in certain positions? So she could go into her birth feeling safe, knowing like, I'm okay, I'm better off in these positions, and she can let go and release to birth, if that makes sense. And then so postpartum, it could also be then healing from prolapse or feeling, stronger in their body. They might have had sensations of like heaviness, or like something's kind of like falling down, right? Or even noticing extra tissue in the vaginal area. Or it could just be, I love when patients come postpartum or moms come for wellness. They're just like, my body has changed and I want a little bit of help, like figuring out who I am in this new body. And we can do all these things, like some rebalancing of the pelvis and the sacrum, and like helping like the bony structures kind of like get back in place, and working on things like posture and breathing again, because your body changes so much during pregnancy. And then postpartum, it's not like, oh, hey, I'm back to normal. It's not like it's just back to its pre-pregnancy state. It's like you've had this balloon that you've then deflated, and it's like looser and like wobbly and figuring life out and figuring things out, and before it's gotten its tone back and like figured out where it is in space. If that kind of makes sense. Yeah, and then again, postpartum, it could be things like leaking urine, or pain with sex, or if they had a perineal tear, episiotomy, working on that kind of thing. And I think some of their biggest ahas, oh my gosh, because there's so many different reasons people come in. I think their biggest aha is like, if they, a lot of them don't come in right away. It's like they find me through Facebook groups, or they find me through their own research. Oftentimes they're not told by their doctors to come in. Midwives tend to be a little bit more pelvic floor physical therapy friendly. Like they're more like, oh, I think you need to go to that. Doesn't mean the other GYNs aren't. I just think they have a different perspective on what a pelvic floor therapist can help them with. If that makes sense. So the ones who find me through their own research, they're like, their aha is like, wow, why was I not ever told this to come months ago or years ago? Or does that make sense? I think that's
Absolutely. I think you
the biggest.
covered so much ground in in what you just shared. And I am positive that nearly everyone listening is shaking their heads like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. All these things seem so common, and yet
Mm-hmm.
they're not normal. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, um, we just kind of put up with it, or we don't talk about it, or
Mm-hmm. Right.
like you mentioned, you had noticed some dysfunction in your teen years.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly I feel the same way. Like when I learn more and going through this therapy myself, lots of ahas. Um, and what you mentioned too about, the different referrals, I think many of us, not just professionals, but many of us just think, oh, I'm going to go to a physical therapist if I, have a really intense perineal tear, or,
Mm-hmm.
you think of something like learning how to walk again, like the rehab.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be so extreme. And what you said there, you have clients for just maintenance and wellness. I mean, that's so important. And can you just from a from a physiological perspective, from a physical perspective, can you describe what the pelvic floor is and where it's
Mm-hmm.
connected, and kind of structurally, like what is its job? Is
Mm,
it
yeah.
just in the vaginal area, or what does it do?
Yeah. So your pelvis is, when people say like put your hands on your hips, usually you're at the top crest of your pelvis, right? And then the hips are a little bit further down um, in like the groin area. And so the pelvic floor is at the base of the pelvis. I like to think of a diamond shape between your pubic bone, which hopefully most people know around where the pubic bone is, um, the two sit bones, and your tailbone. If you drew a diamond from pubic bone to, say, your right sit bone to your tailbone to your left sit bone back to your pubic bone, that's where the pelvic floor is. There's 3 layers of the pelvic floor. Um, there are, for people with female genitalia, there's 3 openings. So the urethra, the vaginal canal, and the anus. So sphincters around the anus and the urethra are part of the pelvic floor. Muscles from the sit bones to the perineum, which is the space between the vagina and anus, like the central space. Um, Muscles that go kind of around the opening of the vaginal canal, but then deeper muscles with like a little bit further up, like layers of a cake, kind of. So going a little bit deeper in, there's another, they're the deepest layers, like the lifter layers. So when you might hear in like a Pilates or yoga class, people saying like pull up and in, like that up and in sensation from down below are the lifter muscles. Trying to hold back your gas or hold back your pee are like the sphincter, the closing muscles. So the pelvic floor muscles close the openings, and then they also lift up and support the organs in the pelvis, such as the bladder, the vaginal or the vagina, and the uterus and the rectum. Um, but then they also have to allow you to pee or poo or release gas. So they have to open. They're kind of part of your core system as well. Like they help keep you nice and strong when you're doing anything where you're not laying down, basically. Um, they're also sexual. So they're part of your sexual health. And you can say, let me think. So we've covered, there's like the 5 S's of the function: sphincteric, so the sphincters, sexual, support, stability. Oh, and then they also like kind of help pump fluids, like it's like the sub pump, like they kind of pump like your lymph fluids in your blood because there's a lot that goes through your pelvis. So that's kind of the functions. And hopefully that kind of painted a picture for your guests
Yeah.
or your
So
listeners.
if you think about it like a muscle group, these are
Mm-hmm.
very important muscles and muscle chain that
Mm-hmm.
do quite a bit. Um, and I just wanted to bring us back to when you mentioned some of the reasons or some of the things that you do with your clients are basics. Like this is one of my ahas when I went in my pelvic PT this year is learning how to breathe properly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
What I learned, and this is also just I like you mentioned, like I know this, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
different in practice. So I also come
Mm-hmm.
from a yoga background, and you realize that you don't actually breathe like with your lungs, you breathe with your diaphragm, and
Mm-hmm.
you can breathe so that your lower abs contract, and you're breathing from your diaphragm, and so you're not pressing down and out when you exhale, because all that pressure downward actually puts more pressure on your pelvic floor. So like even when you sneeze or cough, there's a proper way to do that to where you're not
Mm-hmm.
like a shaken like soda bottle pushing all
Mm-hmm.
this pressure down. You let it
Mm-hmm.
go up and out.
Yeah, exactly. I always think of it as like a tube of toothpaste. And if you
Mm,
like squeeze in the center of it, the toothpaste goes up, out. Okay, that's where we want it, but it goes down to the bottom, which is really annoying, right?
right. You're right.
So there's like pressure up, there's pressure down. So if you're just squeezing the center, like your abdominals all the time, or and you're not giving the proper support from below, like your pelvic floor, right? So if you're not squeezing your toothpaste from the bottom up, you're still going to be having this amount of pressure down there at the bottom. So exactly like you said, like getting that bottom up or that pressure movement in the correct direction with like a cough or a sneeze is like the it seems so simple, but it's so powerful because
Yes.
people don't always think about, oh, all I had to do was like Kegel and send my pressure upward when I sneeze and I stopped leaking. Like not
Literally,
everybody, but some
Ashley,
people.
that is exactly what brought me to pelvic health PT when I was
Mm-hmm.
pregnant because I was experiencing some mild incontinence. And I didn't learn this until I actually changed providers. And there was just more thorough work being done together. But she was the one that was like, show me how you cough, show me how you sneeze. And I was just like, wow, I problem solved, exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and these are just things that where else are you going to learn that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you come out of your birth and you just say like, oh, my pelvic floor is intact, like I'm happy I didn't tear or whatever,
Yeah.
and you think you're good,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, but you might also benefit from working with a pelvic floor therapist.
To- totally. And because I have patients that are older, like in their 60s and 70s, and some of what they're going through and we talk about and we work on, they're like, I think this is because I didn't do anything postpartum. Like they remember postpartum was like pretty fine, but what they went through for birth, it's such a huge, I mean, your pelvic floor stretches to 3 times its size. Like what other part of your body would do that and you wouldn't go work on it in
Okay.
rehab?
So I know that you and I both feel strongly about this. Like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. I see that this is changing, not fast enough for my liking,
Yeah.
but this feeling like pregnant women are just being moved along like
Oh,
machines, like
yeah.
objects. They just give birth and
Hmm.
you just go in once or twice, and you get up like one
Hmm.
one little check here, like you you just get
Totally.
a couple questions and then oh you're good regardless of how you
Sometimes
gave
they
birth.
don't even look at their vagina. They
Yeah.
don't even have them take their pants off to see what's going on and to feel if they're able to use these muscles or ask the right questions. They don't even ask
Mhm.
the questions. Like,
Yeah.
and at 6 weeks, those questions might not be answered in a way that even like most people are probably not returning to penetrative intercourse at 6 weeks. Granted, I've had patients who at 4 weeks are like ready and have already had sex and are happy. And I'm like, that's awesome. But a lot of people, sometimes it might be 6 months or a year, or, so like you might not even know right away that there is a potential issue with your own body. So like even if the questions are asked, it might not be known, but um during at least a vaginal delivery, like the pelvis and the sacrum shift and move, and they don't always shift back. Like the sit bones have to open and spread. So it's like everything is like moved out of where they normally are. Plus, then again, like I said, the muscles stretch about 3 times their size. Your abdomen had been on a lot of stretch and tension. So you almost have like this false sense of strength because there's just like tension on the tissues. And then it's like, again, you've let the air out of the balloon and they're like trying to figure, people can't hear me when I like move my fingers around, but it's just like looser and your body just is like trying to figure out how to live in space again. It's like, yeah. Even if somebody doesn't notice that there's an issue, just getting their body feeling a little bit back in balance can be so beneficial to their physical body, but their nervous system, knowing they're supported, and also knowing like, hey, you feel great, but here's some things that if this pops up later, give me a call or know there's help for it. And like, so that they don't have to go on feeling these things, wondering if this is like a normal postpartum thing. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And what
um,
you started to describe is a little bit more into the energetics
mm,
of, feeling all loosey goosey and kind of discombobulated after you give birth.
mm-hmm,
And,
yeah,
the pelvic floor is your root chakra.
mm-hmm,
It's your sense of stability and rootedness in
mm-hmm,
the world.
mm-hmm,
And you mentioned that the pelvic floor has a lot to do with our core
mm-hmm,
stability, our core strength as
mm-hmm,
well, just because when you put your hands on your hips, you're still in touch with your pelvic floor at the top of it. So
mm-hmm,
it goes well beyond your root.
mm-hmm,
And I will just say, from my own experience working with my PT, pelvic PT, specifically, we did a lot of core stabilization and hip stabilization. And that actually has helped me be more confident, not only working out, but just feeling more rooted and grounded
mm-hmm,
because of that sense of muscle, not only strength, but like awareness
mm-hmm,
of trying to find those
100%.
muscles again. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's like you finally are like waking up to your body again. And I sometimes I tell my moms, it's like you've birthed a baby who now the baby is learning new motor patterns. Like they start grabbing at their toes. That's how they're developing their core again. They're learning how to crawl and walk. I mean, not right away, but you know what I'm saying? Like roll over and do this. So are you. You kind of are doing the same thing. It's like you're in a new you, a new body, and you've like you're rebirthed, right? Like you've birthed a baby and you're in a new body. So like you got to figure you out too while your baby's figuring out baby. But we're not a baby who just gets to have somebody else take care of us. So we have to kind of like get that support and guidance,
And
move
that
us.
exactly is where I was going when I was saying, there's a shift happening. We're having
Mm-hmm,
these conversations more about this needs to change. Women need more support. Women need more bandwidth to get
mm-hmm,
support and receive support. And we also need to understand what type of support is available and should be available, like
yeah,
what you do with pelvic health. I personally feel, and I'm sure you're with me, that this should be a standard of care.
yeah,
Um, absolutely. And it's just mind blowing to me that, not only I had to advocate for myself to get even referred and
mm-hmm,
taken seriously,
mm-hmm,
um, but also that, um, so many, like, I don't know anybody else who went to a pelvic PT. I don't
mm.
know, like,
Your
I,
friends, your
no,
from like no, I know.
no. And yet I get a lot of questions like, what do you do? What's that like?
Mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm,
can we just talk about, like, is it a stigma? Is it a misunderstanding? Is it just a lack of education? Like, what do you think prevents women from saying, I need this and I'm actually going to go?
I think it's the lack of understanding and lack of education. Because I think once the moms realize what pelvic floor physical therapy is and how it can be helpful, you don't have to be fully like leaking, like releasing your whole bladder to be able to go and get help in this area. Um, I think that is what, and probably also the stigma, or the fact that it's not talked about as much. I think it's improving, but like, for example, when somebody injures their knee, they're probably talking to their sports friends over here about how they went to physical therapy and rehab and now they're running better than they've ever ran before. People I know, I mean, I see it on social media, people are more openly sharing it and stuff, but it's still not as openly shared. Like, I'm leaking urine and I went to go to physical therapy. And it might be, again, like, a few drops come out. Then they feel like, well, is that even enough to even do anything? Like, should I? Like, why? And then they might tell their doctors, and their doctors might be like, oh, it's just a few drops, or like, you just
Or
had a
just say
baby.
it's normal. I mean, because
Of
I hear
course
it all
it's
the
going to
time.
happen, because yeah, just because it's common doesn't mean that has to be your story. If it doesn't feel right for you, then it doesn't feel right for you. You've been in your body the longest. Like, you should be able to make a choice of, I don't want this to happen and I'm going to seek help. But I think then the problem is they tell a doctor and the doctor either doesn't refer them. So then the patient just keeps on going. They're living their life the way it is because people aren't talking about it and they haven't heard about it. But once they hear about it, they're like, oh, I'm going. Does that make sense? So I feel like it's a combination of the lack of education, not just to like the patients and the people and the moms, but to the professionals at the doctors. I don't even think they quite fully grasp the resources that they could be giving their patients.
Yeah,
And then the stigma
absolutely.
of like a mom might not want to say to their doctor that they're leaking urine because they might not think it's important, or that they're having pain with sex. And then the doctor's like, have a glass of wine. And you're like, well, great. That's not what I
Use better
wanted to
lube.
hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah, use better lube is a great one, but that's not the full answer. There's so many, it's like, don't just give them the Band-Aid. Give them like the Band-Aid and the ointment to heal and the proper nutrition and like a little bit extra. Don't just,
Absolutely. I also just want to share very personally. Um, you mentioned a couple times pain with sex
hmm
and perhaps not jumping right in after 6 weeks when you're cleared. I also had a perineal tear. I had a third-degree tear with a vacuum extraction. It was pretty traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when we first tried, I actually I actually had to stop because from my hips down were like trembling. It was an
Mm-hmm.
energetic release. Like, I had felt
Mm-hmm.
this before, just, through my yoga practice and my own healing journey. So I wasn't like too, messed up about it. I knew what it was, but it was definitely like there was stored tension in that area. Like, no, nothing else is coming in here. I remember the
Mm-hmm.
last time something came
Yeah.
through here and my scar tissue was like, oh, hell no.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of, I mean, it definitely, it got better with time um, and lube, obviously. That's kind of like the duh. But like, what I'm saying is, I worked with my pelvic PT to do some scar tissue remediation. And this is manual remediation, it's like a muscle release, just like how you would if you say to go to
Mm-hmm.
a chiropractor and you have tension in your trap, in your
Mm-hmm.
shoulders, and they kind of hold
Mm-hmm.
tension on it. It relaxes the muscle. And, this was very gentle, very loving, very trusting in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And she just held space for me, honestly, to feel it and to let go, let my emotions go. And I truly believe that, I mean, just having that space held for me and knowing that I'm not the only one who, you know, has gone through or is going to in the future this type of um trauma, like physical trauma, like to have hands-on support and the container of lovingly witnessing me and holding that space, like, okay, this is a space for you to let go of what happened,
Mm-hmm.
like to move through this energetic
Mm-hmm.
release, because otherwise I would have, my body is just going to hold on.
Mm-hmm. It's
Like
going
you
to
had mentioned,
protect and
it's going to
guard and
protect
like,
and guard.
mhm,
Right. It needs that space. And you know, I can't necessarily do that for myself. I can't, I mean, I could, but like, I'm not going to sit there, you know, in my day to day and do that with myself.
mhm,
And so I just also want to offer this, you know, this is not solely like learning how to breathe and you know, your
mhm,
posture and, you know,
mhm.
stabilization exercises. It's, for me personally, it's been so much more than that. And I found a fantastic provider, and she will probably listen to this episode, and Bailey, I love you. So um yeah, I really need, I felt called to share that very personal experience just because I feel called to, and it's so important. I just want to drive home, like, it's so important that this becomes, this work that you do in pelvic health becomes broader knowledge and standard of care,
Yeah,
regardless of how your birth turns out.
100%. Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. And it's like our bodies hold on to like our memories, we like physically, you can't separate the physical and like the emotional and the mental and all that. Um, and sometimes adding like that's support and knowing like you're being cared for by somebody and like someone's got you, and giving you that space to just like let that go and release it and like I'm okay, I'm safe, and it's like kind of can process through it instead of holding it and letting it grow stronger. It's kind of like we teach our kids, we hope our kids work through an emotion, right? Like instead of like, no, don't cry, don't stop, no crying aloud. Like we're supposed to go through that and release our emotions and release our stuff. And otherwise it kind of builds up in our tissues, right? So
Yeah, if you think about, with every inhale, there's got to be an exhale. If you just keep
mm,
in, eventually there's just
yeah.
like a, oh, like the tension needs somewhere to go.
Hmm.
And yeah. Well, thank you for holding space for that.
Yeah.
Um, I think it leads nicely actually into something else that you mentioned early on about preparing for birth and letting go and
Mm-hmm.
surrendering. And can you just take that where you feel called to take that?
Yeah. So what I've seen and noticed in my practice is that most people, when they come to me for like birth preparation stuff, or even if they're pregnant and they didn't come for birth prep and we just talk about it, what they've heard is like tighten, 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 Kegel, Kegel, Kegel all through pregnancy. And like, I got to do a million squats and I got to like tighten up everything and be really strong for my birth. And I'm like, well, actually, it's strong for your pregnancy because in birth, those sphincters or those parts of your body need to open, right? They need to release, they need to let go. You have to be able to feel the sensations happening and surrender and trust that that is okay and safe within your body. Um, because if you're feeling intense stretching sensations or any burning or anything in like your perineum during a vaginal delivery and there's some memory there's something that kind of um caught like and it could be from your past, it could be from anything, right? But that like it gives you any fear, you're going to tighten that area up and kind of slow that process. It's really, so part of when I'm working with a pregnant mom to get them ready for birth is we'll do like a perineal massage in a way that's like really mindful. We're not just grabbing lube and like stroking and like it's not like a Swedish massage for your vagina. It's like
That's great.
let's feel some tension and like intense sensations and see what comes up for you, and can we breathe through this, can we relax into it, can we allow it to happen and still feel safe. Like there's so many other pieces of that perineal massage, um but yeah, that's kind of a huge part of preparing for birth. And I don't think a lot of people realize the connection between our physical body and like our mind. And um, if we're not surrendering up here, we're not surrendering down there. But vice versa also, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I felt that in my own labor for sure. And what you described is just invaluable. I feel if you're pregnant and your goal is to have a vaginal birth, invaluable. And this practice of letting go and surrendering, like all through your pregnancy, it's going to serve you far into your life, into motherhood and beyond. But it's really essential. And I mentioned that I ended up having, vacuum assistance with my baby. His position was all messed up, but I also recognized that I had some mental resistance of like crossing that threshold. And
Mhm.
because what lied on the other side was motherhood. And I
Totally.
just got to that point where it's like, I can't turn back. This is like the end of my life as I know it. And it not doom and gloom, obviously, but just like, whoa, just the enormity of that. I was thinking about that in my labor. And um, yeah, I mean, I labored for about 40 hours. And so we definitely did everything like position wise, but a lot of it was mental, emotional, and surrendering, and something that I was also thinking about when I got to the end and I had those urges to like push and bear down, also in the back of my mind, because I wasn't trained on how to push, because I hadn't done work like you were just describing, I was thinking to myself also, I'm wrecking myself right now. Like
Mm,
I was simultaneously like, could not, stop the urges to like bear down. But then I was also thinking, whoa, like, what am I doing to my body? Because it just felt out of
yeah.
control.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sharing a lot, but it's just like, man, this education and these
Yeah.
types of conversations, like they're normal.
Yeah.
It needs to be normal.
Yeah. I see a lot of moms come to me for their second birth because they had those exact same comments that you had said. I felt out of control. I was told to push and like hold my breath and do this. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I would ask them, like, I wanted to watch and see them do a Kegel release and like lengthen or open or as if you were pooping or whatever it is. And they would be the ones who are tightening and Kegling when I would want to see them releasing or opening. And I'm like, okay, like this is where we got to work. We got to work on that understanding what your body, when you're tightening, what does that feel like internally? Because I'm not going to be there at your birth to watch you. And like, what does it feel like internally when you're opening and releasing? And how can we use our breath with that to make it easier for your body so you can do it in a way where you feel safe and not feel like, oh shit, am I allowed to say that on here? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
like, do we need to edit that out? Um, what's going on and like just having, I always say competence builds confidence, because when you have a sense of like understanding and knowing, then you feel like confident, you feel safe, you feel like I can do this because you understand. It's like we often fear what we don't know. It's like that scary monster under the bed.
It's not a
Like,
threat. It's
is something
normal.
there? Is
Yeah.
something, you know, like we freak, but if we looked under and we're like, oh, it's just dust, or oh, it's just dirty clothes that someone threw under there, like, then we're okay. But
Man. And this again goes back to this societal like overculture of just
mm-hmm,
this process being a very like mechanized, like we're just gonna
yeah,
beep beep boop you through your appointments, see if you just check these numbers, compare you to these charts, and you're good. We're gonna move you on. Never, giving this education. And there's so many reasons for this, but I think if I'm here philosophizing, so I'm not going to say if, like I am philosophizing. I just believe that this starts very early on with women. Just even, I mean, sex ed is like, don't have sex. It's not teaching you about, these are the names of your genital, like this is how
yeah,
you're built, this is how you're made. Go on, take a feel, like get to know
mm-hmm,
yourself. um it's not that, and it's not
mm-hmm,
empowering, and it's like hush hush and make
mm-hmm,
yourself small, hide it away. Don't talk about it. You don't talk about pee and poo, you don't talk about
mm-hmm,
stuff down there. And it's just like woven throughout our
mm-hmm,
lives. And so now, I mean, you get like just like a like knocked sideways when you're trying to figure
mm-hmm,
this out after this monumental thing that your body knows how to do, but just needs a little bit more support
mm-hmm,
um afterwards. Like, or even, we were talking about during birth, like,
mm-hmm.
yes, it's instinctual, yes, it's natural, but is there ways to make it easier? And is there things that we can do like with our mind and, to loosen the body up or
Mm-hmm.
let the baby come down? I mean,
Yeah, because like even though it's like this innate ability that everybody has within them, we still can have blocks, whether it's mental or emotional or physical. And part of it is just like learning what are those blocks, becoming aware that they're there, and then working through them depending on what they are so that they don't interrupt the birth process, because there's other interruptions, like if you're in a hospital, the doctor's coming in, the beeping noises, the all the things. um so it's like let's get rid of all the other blocks that might be there.
I'm so glad
Whether
that you just referenced that, because I think that that's also just kind of accepted as common to be in the environment, in a birthing environment, and how actually it's more primal than that. And if you observe, animals in the wild, or even humans when they're
Mhm,
free to birth as feels comfortable, like most go into caves or dark places or places where they feel very safe, and not in loud, bright, very sterile,
mhm,
environments with people poking and prodding them,
mhm.
strangers even.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's this video that shows, and I show this to the people who take my birth prep program. It's part of it. I like to show the link to how birth is like sex. And they have a couple in a hospital room, and they're like, okay, you guys are going to go have sex. But every few minutes they're walking in and like interrupting them. And can you imagine trying to like relax your how much do you have to like relax and like turn your mind off to get in your body for sex to feel good, and then for you to orgasm or have pleasure. Birth is very similar in the whole process of like, you have to be able to like get in your body and feel safe and comfortable and everything to be able to also
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
release. It's a different release. It's a release your baby versus like release the orgasm. But like, it's a, if you look it up online, hopefully porn doesn't come up for anybody and it's really just like the video, but
Well, it's
interesting.
oxytocin is,
Uh-huh.
needs to
The
be
love
released,
hormone.
the love
Yeah.
hormone. And that is what strengthens contractions, and cortisol,
Hmm.
the stress hormone, is the opposite of that. So, yes, if
Right.
you're in a stressful environment and things that you may not even perceive as stressful, but your body does, like,
Hmm.
strangers poking and
Hmm.
prodding or asking you what time it is or whatever. Um, yeah, that it distracts from your hormonal physiological processes. And then,
Yes. Hmm.
women are in hospital environments and then told, like, put on a clock and then told, oh, you're not progressing and it must be something wrong with you, like off to
And then
surgery.
adrenaline keeps shooting
Oh
up,
my
right?
gosh. Yeah.
Cortisol. And then that actually increases your, you become more sensitive to pain
Yep. Yep.
when,
Yep.
so there's like, it's just, it's amazing how these like external things create chemical changes within your body that then affect your,
Right.
so yeah.
It's just one more nod to our bodies and how they're beautifully, wonderfully made and so intelligent and
Hmm.
working for us all the time. And we just, a lot of times, just take it for granted. We
Hmm.
see what's on the outside and not all the
Hmm.
processes happening on the inside. Um, so we have had such a lively conversation, and unfortunately, we need to wrap it up. But
Yeah,
I
right.
do have some final questions for you. And they're a little bit more personal, to wrap up. So you mentioned you're a mother of two beautiful girls,
Hmm.
and I want to ask you more about your own motherhood and what would you say are the gifts of motherhood for you?
Oh man, I feel like I've learned a lot of lessons being a mother. Um, so I think it's they've just taught me and helped me grow as I've watched them grow. Um, yeah, I just feel like I know that prior to having children, I would say I was more on the selfish side and like really, it's I've learned that actually being a little selfish is good if it's done in the way that it's, that you taking care of you is you taking care of them. Whereas prior to being a mother, it was just like a child, like life is all about me, right? So I've seen that, like, yeah, life is all about you and you changing you actually changes the people around you and the world around you. Does that make sense? I don't, so they've helped me see like through just a whole new lens, so to
Yeah,
say.
you can give from the fullness of you versus a depleted version of you, because motherhood is demanding and it takes so much.
Yeah.
So taking a
Yeah.
pause actually gives more of yourself to you, or gives,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear that. Would you say, what would you say, what life lesson is present for you right now, or what are you working with in your own self discovery right now?
Mm, it's a hard question. I think that and it's funny that we just talked about surrendering and letting go, but it's like, it's just still continuing to surrender and let go is like letting go of things being the way I like want them to turn out and like go just like kind of going a little bit more with the flow of things and understanding life throws things at me and it's either to learn a lesson or it's um or it's to just progress forward. If I don't progress forward, it's not for anything. It's not anything bad. It's like to learn a lesson, to just keep growing. Like we're here to just keep growing is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Dory, like swimming through. Maybe she's
Just
swimming
keep
through the
swimming.
jellyfish, like just keep growing, dodging these
Just
jellies.
keep, yeah.
Sometimes you get stung.
Yeah. I
But
think I used to like be really hard on myself, and beat myself up about things, and then becoming a mom. And it's like, no, you just like let things go with keep on swimming, just like you said.
you know, I feel like part of that is wisdom. And then there's
Mm,
also kind of that lesson that arises out of like survival because you just have less bandwidth in your energy for like
mm,
the shit, like
yeah.
the stupid stuff that like used to take up some of your mental space or your
Yeah,
energy.
totally.
So you just
You've got
naturally
to,
prioritize out of necessity.
yeah, yeah. And then recognizing like you got to clear the plate or you can't overfill your plate, because then you will be running on empty.
Right. So this is a two-pronged question. What would you like all new first-time moms to know? And then what vision of the future do you have for this coming generation?
Hmm. So kind of what we had talked about, I think, for the first time moms is like, well, it's kind of on that level of like your body is different, and please don't compare yourself to like the mom next door, the mom on Instagram, the mom, because now, like, right, we're all seeing all these people on Instagram, like, oh my God, why do I not look like that? Or why can I not do that? Or why is my body this way and this person is this way? Like, but being gentle with yourself and like at least recognizing and being aware of it so you can then move forward and get help with it, not going down the rabbit hole of um like why me versus like, well, how can I move forward? Does that make sense? Um, and what was the second part? I'm sorry, I just got.
Yeah, it's similar but different. It's more of a vision for the future that you hold for the
Oh,
coming generation.
like we talked about that every mom, it's like you get pregnant, you have a pelvic floor therapist on your team, like by your side, that you start going to. And you don't have to go see them every single week or anything like that, but you have them on your team to gather all these resources, education, knowledge, um, going into your pregnancy and into your birth. And then postpartum, they're still on your team, and that they can help you heal. And that's just like my vision, is that every single person that gets pregnant has like a pelvic floor therapist on their team from pregnancy through postpartum until the mom is ready to fly, right? Like the bird who's taken care of by their mom in the nest. And it's like, you're ready to go. You fly off and do your thing. But that they still know that they have that support is there and they're for them.
Can I get an amen? That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Oh, Ashley, thank you so much for joining me and us here to have this conversation, share your wealth of knowledge. So insightful, so important. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. Where
Yeah,
can we stay in touch with you if we would like more information or to learn more about your birth prep course?
sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Ashley Hocutt. I can spell that ASHLEYHOCUTT. You can, and then from there, you can kind of find me, my YouTube channel where I have some great information. Um, and you can find my birth prep program through my Instagram as well. So yeah, I'd say get started hopefully everyone around here is on the Instagrams. Or my YouTube channel is Below the Bump Coach. So you can also find me there.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Bye.
Bye.